Hello, everybody. So, a lot of people did get confused about where Australia's opening issue came from. Why we're now looking at Jake Weatherald, and we're not even sure if we're going to play a makeshift opener or Weatherald. And we can Weatherald's the only opener other than Kawaja in the side, and indeed Kawaja used to he sort of alternated between opening and number three. Sometimes he batted 5 or 6, but not quite makeshift, but sort of part-time opener. And but we're still considering playing Labuschagne, and I know it hasn't really been mentioned, but also Head or Smith. And there's Josh Inglis in the side as well. So they're all kind of makeshift openers. So how do we get in this mess? Well, we probably should go back to when the last time we had two good openers, which was after Kawaja made his return as an opener, and we had Kawaja and Warner. Now, we had a period before then when there were problems, but at least we had a balanced team. We just kept having bad openers, and we had bad openers with Cameron Bancroft. Before that, we had Marcus Harris. We had a good one for a little while in Renshaw, who was dumped while he was in form, which was crazy, because we thought, oh, well, Bancroft's in even better form. Again, isn't that what's going on with Labuschagne? We're sort of saying, oh, look, let's dump the inform Bo Webster, who's been our best player for the last year. And Webster's in better form than Renshaw was in 2017. And I'd say Renshaw in 2017 was in good form, good enough to keep his spot. There were no talks about him losing his spot, and then suddenly he lost his spot. It was meant to be Matthew Wade's spot that was on the line, the wicketkeeper spot. And we were talking about who was going to take the wicketkeeper spot. Cameron Bancroft's name came up as a wicketkeeper. Suddenly he's opening and we're dropping Renshaw. But we also did have decent openers partnering Warner going back to Shane Watson was okay as an opener. He wasn't amazing, but he was okay and he bowled a bit, so he did his job. And Chris Rogers was, of course, a good opening partner for David Warner. And of course, we go back even further. We had a long period of good openers, and obviously Matthew Hayden with Justin Langer was great. We had players like Mark Taylor with Michael Slater. We had David Boone was a good opener. We had Jeff Marsh a good opener. We had a long period of really good openers, which pretty much ended with Matthew Hayden and Justin Langer. And then we had David Warner and Chris Rogers, and then it was David Warner plus. We're not sure. We finally got Usman Khawaja, and then Warner left soon after, and since then it's been Usman Khawaja plus. So that's your scenario as to why we haven't had a good second opener. And obviously with Khawaja getting to 38 years old now, we are at a stage where we need to find someone. But that's not really, well, that's part of the problem. And when Warner retired, we should have tried another opener. Now, who was in the mix? Well, at the time, it was still Marcus Harris, Cameron Bancroft, or Matthew Renshaw. Those three names were always the three that were next off the line. And the problem was that none of those three really stuck their hand up as obvious choices. So selectors decided to ask the middle order players who would open. Now, Travis Head had already opened once before that, and got some good stats from it. He refused. He said he's done it once, that's all he's ever going to do. They asked Marnus Labuschagne, and he went, no, I'm never going to open. And they asked Steve Smith, and he said, yes, I want to open. So Smith opened. He did fairly well. But the reason they did that is because they wanted to bring Cameron Green back into the side, because at the same test match, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, and because media haven't focused on it, the same test match that David Warner retired, our all-rounder, who was at the time Mitchell Marsh, injured his bowling. He injured himself so he couldn't bowl, and I'm not sure exactly if it was a side injury or what the issue was, but he was able to bat, and he was our best batsman at the time, but he was unable to bowl. And the selectors said, look, Cameron Green is in form. We want to play Cameron Green as our all-rounder. Okay. But they didn't want to drop Mitchell Marsh because he was our best batsman. So instead of that, they used David Warner's retirement to squeeze Cameron Green in. Now you might think, okay, so have Green open. But they didn't do that. So instead, because Green refused to open. So Green and Labuschagne refused to open. Had Green opened, wouldn't have been a problem. Could have had Marsh open, wouldn't have been a problem. And Marsh opens in ODI and T20 cricket now, all the time. So we could have had Khawaja and Marsh opening. But instead we had, and that would have been stable, instead we had Khawaja and Smith. Then we made it, Green injured himself just ahead of the Indian series last year. And he had to go off and get operations and all that, was out for a long time. And so then we were looking for an all-rounder. And the fast bowlers, of course, they need an all-rounder to give them a bit of a break. And that's mainly Stark, but in recent times it's been Hazlewood. They're bowlers that bowl best with short, sharp spells. Now, certainly Stark, that's his career. If you give Stark lots and lots of overs, he either injures himself or he bowls at a much worse quality. And you need to have him bowling at his best, and that's what the all-rounder is for. It's to increase his potency. And there used to be a time when that was the case for Pat Cummins, but he has improved, so you don't need that anymore. But that is now the case for Josh Hazlewood. Now, I'll say that isn't the case for Scott Boland either at the moment. So with Boland and Cummins in the same side, you can probably get away without an all-rounder. But if you have Stark and Hazlewood as two of your bowlers, you do need one. And the other problem is that Nathan Lyon is no longer a player that can play on all surfaces. And I think we're now at the situation where Lyon needs to be rested when we play on tracks that don't have much for the spinner. And we've seen a lot of matches where Lyon has been carried. He's not bowled, and that puts even more pressure on the bowlers. We saw in Brisbane last year where Josh Hazlewood broke down. We didn't have an all-rounder. Marsh was supposed to bowl, but he couldn't. And so it really was the difference between a win and, well, we got a draw out of it. And so it was very, very relevant. Now, obviously, Hazlewood shouldn't have played he was playing with an injury, but we also needed to have that all-rounder. And obviously, we ended up dropping Marsh, bringing Bo Webster in, and that created a lot more stability. We also dropped Webster, who I think definitely deserved to be dropped, and we brought in Sam Constas, and that Constas was at least a normal opening batsman. So we head over now, and now we have Webster as the all-rounder, Green's in there as playing as a batsman, and now Green may be able to transform back into an all-rounder, we're hoping. So a lot of people are confused about how we got there. So if we went back in time when Warner retired, given that Marsh was also changing his role from an all-rounder to a batsman, and yes, we wanted to play Green, I think we should have probably put Marsh into open. And if we'd put Marsh into open, I think we would have kept him as an opener from then until now. And okay, then when Green was injured, we could have played Bo Webster in the first test last year. So if that was the case, because we've got to realise that Marsh was only dropped last year because he was injured. I know people say, oh, but he was so out of form. He actually wasn't. That was the media lying about things. He got a couple of low scores, but it was mainly because of injury. And he was still a very good batsman, and still is. And an informed batsman. So I think that we've got to just say that we could have had Marsh as the opener for the last 2 years from when Warner retired. Now, that might not have worked. If he failed, then I think we could have replaced him with another opener. But the point is not whether or not Marsh is the best choice. The point is he was the best choice at the time. And then we could have then looked at, because I think if Marsh failed with the bat, we could have replaced him with someone else and just left him out of the side. And the important part was the stability. And when we went to the Indian series, if we had Marsh opening, it would have been clearer that we needed an all-rounder. We didn't need Nathan McSweeney. We needed an all-rounder. And the best uninjured all-rounder going around at the time was Bo Webster. Now, I'm not saying he was the best all-rounder, but Aaron Hardy was injured. Michael Neser, more of a bowling all-rounder, was also injured. And, that meant that Bo Webster was the next best. We obviously had Cameron Green injured. Mitchell Marsh was unable to bowl. So, injured from that point of view, from the point of view that he can't be considered an all-rounder. And that's the thing. So, we could have played Cooper Connolly. Mind you, he failed pretty badly in his test debut, but that was later on. We didn't know he was going to fail that badly. But he's also a spin bowling all-rounder, and I don't know that he could handle enough overs to be an all-rounder in tests. So that's a big issue. That's how we got to that situation. So what is the solution? Well, we now have 2 all-rounders, which is fantastic. We probably only need 1. We could drop 1, but the problem is they're both in great form. And unless there's an injury concern, we can't drop 1. And we should learn the lesson from 2 years ago where we accommodated Green returning by stuffing up our whole, the balance of the side. And then when Green was injured, instead of replacing an all-rounder, we put in an opening batsman that didn't bowl. I know Nathan McSweeney does bowl a little bit occasionally. I don't think he's test level with his bowling, not even all-rounder test level. So I think that, and also Nathan McSweeney wasn't an opener, but that was sort of a secondary issue. So if we'd gone in to the first test against India, and instead of playing McSweeney, we played Bo Webster, would have been a much better side. Now, who opens then? I think it probably would have been Mitchell Marsh. Then I don't think Mitchell Marsh is dumped. Mind you, you never know, he might have failed. But that was probably the better option. And that's the thing that we stuffed up. We went looking, we had a 4-player bat off for the opening position when we should have had a 4-player all-rounder off and worked out who was going to be the next all-rounder. That is, if we decided to do that, bat off, all-rounder off, whatever. So that was, we were looking for the wrong position. Now today, we now have Jake Weatherall, has come into form, has done the right thing. He is a normal opener. He's in form. He has to play. And this is the issue that a lot of people are saying, oh no, we've got to play Marnus Lavishogna. For balance, we don't. It is good to have a good player in reserve. We had it before. When Usman Khawaja made his way back into the team, he was scoring runs for fun. In fact, he'd had several times in his career when he was in that sort of tip-top form. And he was still a fringe player because there was no vacancy. And he ended up opening because Marcus Harris was no good. And he had opened before. He was open to opening. So that was the issue. And I think that, you need to have balance. And the fast bowlers have complained. They've gone on record saying, oh goodness, when we didn't have an all-rounder in our ranks, we had to bowl so often, so many overs. It diminished their ability to bowl. Like, they still try, they do their best. But they couldn't perform at their best. And this is particularly true of Stark and Hazelwood. And I think a lot of Hazelwood's recent injuries have been because we didn't have an all-rounder. And there was too much workload. And, his body is getting older and it can't handle that as much as it could in previous years. Scott Boland can handle a long workload, and we're increasingly finding that Pat Cummins can. So those two can, Hazelwood and Stark can't. Stark does get injured quite a bit at the moment, but he also, it's not just the injury, he also loses his performance. Hazelwood keeps pushing himself so his performance doesn't drop, but then he just hurts himself, is off injured. I know a lot of people are saying, oh no, fast bowlers wouldn't complain. Well, they actually have. And they've had damage to their ability to play. So this is not just me talking. This is facts. This is proven facts. They've admitted that. You can see the results. You can see the injuries. There's a lot of facts behind that. So the solution is we have to play Jake Weatherall. Now, I would have said it. We didn't have to play specifically him. We could have played a different batsman, a different proper opener. But we need to look for the future there. Now, I've said a few times, I'm happy for Josh Inglis to open, but I think that he wants to be the wicketkeeper. So, and I also think that now that we've got Weatherald in the side, it wouldn't be fair to put Inglis in to open. It wouldn't be stupid to put Inglis. I think Inglis is more likely to work as an opener than Weatherald will. But look, you never know. If Weatherald can work, great. That's fantastic, amazing. That'll be an extra player that we didn't have before. And I know some people say, "Oh, but you don't want to risk with an Ashes." Well, I'm sorry. We're probably going to win this Ashes pretty easily, and I think it is the time to blood them. If you're not blooding them, you play Inglis. I'm sorry, he's your opener. You don't play Labuschagne because that's an absolute disaster. You don't play him opening, definitely not. But you would blood Inglis. You'd say, Inglis, mate, you're an opener now. Your wicket-keeping dreams are disappeared. If you want to play for Australia, you're an opener. In tests, he can keep wicket in the shorter formats. And that's what you would say to him. If we're worried about that, we play Inglis. In fact, you don't even play Khawaja. If we're sort of going, well, we're going to put our best side in there. But you'd always need to be looking not just at the current day, but also at the future. And we don't need to worry about Inglis. He can open. We know he can. We don't need to try him in tests. He's been tried. He's done well. We don't need to try him at international level. He's been tried. He's done well. We don't yet know if Weatherald is going to be any good. If Weatherald, he could be the best opener we've ever seen. It's unlikely, but you never know. And we need to try that. So anyway, so that's just a bit of an explanation because I know a lot of people out there are confused how we got into this situation. And it's mainly because the media have been lying to us quite a lot. Particularly last year when they were saying, oh, it was a 4-player battle for the opening position when we needed an all-rounder. And then, oh, Marsh can bowl. He's fine. He's an all-rounder. Oh, he can bowl, can he? Oh, okay. And then he broke down. He couldn't bowl. So, yeah, that was a bit of a disaster and a bit of lying by various media outlets and the whole group that lied about that. And I think when you have overseas tours, like to New Zealand, and people aren't aware really of what goes on over there. I mean, obviously I have, and I get the different cricket channels that watch all of the overseas matches, and I watch pretty much every match, so I'm probably a bit more aware than some people who get a bit confused when they're lied to a lot about that. And yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of people saying we have to pick Marnus Labuschagne, we have to pick him. The same people who were saying, oh, we've got to drop him. And they were saying that for 2 years in a row. And now they're saying we've got to pick him. I'm sorry, guys. You can't have both ways. I think it was right to drop him. I think he should have been dropped. He shouldn't have played in the World Test Championship. But I think it was right to play him in Sri Lanka. But he should have been dropped for the World Test Championship final. I'm not sure if Cameron Green should have played. And I definitely think Sam Constant should have made that one. I think he should have played the Sri Lanka tour too. Constant should have. But, you know, we make a lot of selection mistakes, and they do, and that's fair. They're selectors. You know, it's easy sitting on the armchair for me to look back and say, no, these are blunders. It's easy for me to look, and this is the thing. I make my predictions, make my suggestions. They're usually right. They usually are proven to be right later on. I don't just make these things up. And that's why selectors have often gone based on, well, not just me, but people like me who can look back a bit separated from the whole thing, make informed decisions, and they often do go with what I say or what other people in similar positions say. And so if I was going to have a message to the selectors right now, it would very, very loudly and clearly be saying, you don't have to play Labuschagne. You don't. You can leave him out. You can play him if Green is not fit, that he's got a lot of injury issues. And he can be injury cover. You don't have to play Weatherald, but I think you should. And it is too difficult to put Labuschagne in without stuffing other things up. And that's the big message I want to say to selectors who are thinking, oh, he's made so many runs, he's forcing his way, he's knocking the door down. You've got to have a vacancy. And we don't have a vacancy at number 3. We have a vacancy as an opener. If he was presenting himself as an opener, if he'd been opening the batting all the time, yeah, absolutely, he could go. But he hasn't been. If he'd played those 3 Shield matches as an opener, all right, no worries, play him. Give him a shot. He's committed to being an opener. He doesn't want to open, he wants to bat at 3. And fair enough, he wants to bat at 3. You want to bat at 3, you bat at 3. It's not necessarily selfish, but it is. Some players put their foot down and they say, no, we're not compromising. I want to bat at 3. That's what he said. He's going to bat at 3. He'll consider batting at 4. But he's definitely not opening. He's never going to open. And anybody who saw the way he reacted when he was forced to open for the World Test Championship final, he was not happy. And that's the thing. Like, they always try to say the right thing. And they've always got to toe the company line a bit. And there's certain rules about what they can say. But yeah, so yeah, that's just to explain that whole situation. And we are, for the first time in a very long time, we're not only facing the prospect of having one opening position uncertain, we potentially could be soon finding 2. And that's why it is so crucial. If Labuschagne was there and we knew he was going to be there for another 10 years, it wouldn't be such a panic. But I think given that he's probably going to retire soon, we do need to play Weatherall to see how he goes. Yeah, it's all for me. Bye-bye now.